A bit closer, better? Okay, great. First of all, of course, my compliments to you, Maximilien, Durand, Camille, Finet, and the whole team for this, for the organization of this wonderful event. I think it's really inspiring, the proof here is in the pudding that so many people. Yesterday it was, I think, a great success, and today as well. So my compliments, and thank you for your invitation. For my talk today, I found inspiration in the English title of the conference, Gazing at Icons. The Oxford and Cambridge dictionaries define gazing as follows: a steady or intent look, and also to look at something for a long time, especially in surprise or admiration. Well, we all look at icons in admiration, otherwise we wouldn't have been here. And for this talk, I decided to focus on the practice of looking at something intently for a long time. My background is a little different from most of yours. I studied art history, and after my graduation, decided to enter the commercial art world, just like my father. And I opened a gallery specializing in Russian and Greek icons in Amsterdam, running it for over 30 years. About 2.5 years ago, I closed the gallery and moved to the US to become the new executive director of the Icon Museum and Study Center in Clinton, Massachusetts. It's about an hour drive from Boston. The commercial art world is fast-paced and very hectic. As an art dealer, you have to manage many different, often practical things, and you are always struggling to keep up to date with the latest research and literature on icons. However, one major advantage of being an art dealer, and it is a big one, is that you get to see and really scrutinize thousands of icons, year after year. Not on a screen or in a book, but in your hands. This allows you to build a mental database of icons, and is an incredibly useful way of learning to discern the ordinary from the exceptional and the imitation from the authentic. What has been immensely useful to me as well on this journey were the countless hours spent with conservators, watching them clean icons, remove old varnish, identify different paint layers, recognize distinct craquelure patterns, understand wear, and the damage done by earlier conservation efforts. These experiences made me realize at an early stage that intently looking at icons, seeing as many as possible, and engaging in conversations with conservators and with collectors, curators, and scholars was one of the best ways to learn and to truly understand these objects. True appreciation from any visual art form comes from seeing. Looking, gazing at icons may sound easy, but it's much harder than it seems. In our digitized world, we are bombarded with images daily. We're constantly on our iPhones and computer screens, and it's probably more difficult for us than for generations before us to really look closely. Moreover, in today's museum world, focusing on objects themselves may not always be the highest priority anymore. In 2015, Theodore Stebbins, the illustrious former curator of American art at the Harvard Art Museums and the Museum of Art in Boston, wrote, and I quote, "The age of great acquisitions and the kind of experience required are over, replaced by the age of ideas and interpretation. Today, art, museum objects are used more as a means of examining a culture than as an object of study in its own right. For me, for us, the object is primary. Without connoisseurship, how can the public or the scholar be confident that they are considering an authentic work rather than a forgery or a misattribution? What is surely dying out is expertise in the form of connoisseurship among university and museum scholars. The professors disdain it as a lesser trade." End quote. Well, pretty strong words, I know, And I believe that our current, more holistic view of museums, public collections, and exhibitions is a big step forward. Many museums have done an excellent job over the past 2 decades in contextualizing the objects by adding this layer of examining a culture, as Theodore Stebbins puts it. At the same time, I believe that he's addressing something important. This broader approach to art history has resulted in less focus on the object itself. That is just inevitable. And as a result, students, scholars, and museum curators in general are less trained in really knowing, understanding the objects themselves, which can have far-reaching consequences. Sorry. All right. Shall I start all over again? So, that can have far-reaching consequences. Let me give you an example of what can happen when there's just not enough real knowledge and expertise in a particular field, which in our case is the field of icons and Eastern Christian art. An exquisite collection of early Russian icons in the US became world famous in 1980 for all the wrong reasons. The collection was assembled by the American businessman George Hann in the 1930s. We discussed, well, the name was mentioned many times yesterday already, and included many icons purchased directly from the Tretyakov Gallery in Moscow, as well as part of the sell-off of, of Russian art that yesterday we discussed with Wendy Sol. However, when the collection was offered for sale by Christie's New York in 1980, a Russian expert and conservator, Vladimir XVe-XXe, who lived in New York, declared that all the icons in the Hann collection were fakes, deliberately sold by the Soviet authorities to deceive an ignorant American businessman. XVe-XXe had studied the icons during the viewing days in New York and presented his findings in a 3-part publication called Icons and Fakes, in which he explained in detail why these icons were not authentic but forgeries. This story made headlines around the world. Journalists just love good scandal, and it does not come any better than American money being fooled by Russian cleverness. But in the end, things turned out to be quite different. I give you 3 examples. This icon of the Nativity was in Christie's catalog described as, was attributed to Novgorod and dated in the 15th century. And XVe-XXe wrote about his icon, and I quote, "A clear imitation of what was thought to be a genuine Novgorod painting of the 15th century. The outline of the figures is dire and excessively decorative, covered with a peculiar lizard skin crackle pattern." End quote. His conclusion then is that the entire icon was painted in the 20th century. The icon now is in a collection of the Banca Intesa in Vicenza, in Italy, and we now know that this is actually a very important icon, painted circa 1475 for the iconostasis of the St. Nicholas Church at Gostinopolia. And other icons, feast day icons from the same feast day though, are now in the Korean collection in Moscow, in the Tretyakov Gallery in Moscow, and Christ among the Doctors, who also, that icon that was for a few years in the collection of the Louvre, exhibited in the Louvre, and that is now in an important private collection in Brussels, comes from the same feast day row as this icon. So, and dated to 1475. Very important icon. Another example. Marble building enthroned with saints. Christie's wrote in their catalog, probably Moscow, late 15th, early 16th And Tetryanikov wrote Forgery of Early 20th Century. And he notes that the folds of the garments of the Virgin are stylistically close to Art Nouveau. And he continues, and here I quote again, anyone who is familiar with genuine icons recognizes that the saints on the board were copied from one of the classic works of Russian icon painting. End quote. He doesn't further specify which icon he's talking about. But, well, I saw this icon. It's in the Menil collection in Houston now, and this is a very bad picture. It's in the flesh. It's so much better. It's a masterpiece in very good condition, and is without any doubt. It can be dated to the early 16th century, and it's from the school of Dionysius. So he was completely wrong again. And I have a third example. For scenes from fashion. Christie's wrote in their catalog Novgorod School 15th century, and Tetryanikov said about this icon, and I quote again, a typical example of Novgorod style painting from the 15th century, at least in a version which was popular in the early 20th century. The colors are brighter than those in genuine Novgorodian icons. End quote. And his conclusion is then that the icon is an enlarged copy of one of the famous tabletti from the Sofia Cathedral in Novgorod. Well, this icon is now part of the collection of the Louvre, as part of the recently acquired Abu Adal collection, and is an original icon dating to the early 16th century. So, the icons in the Hann collection were not fake after all. Tetryanikov turned out to be an expert, which was not much respected in Russia, but it took many years to kind of rediscover the truth. In the 1980s, there simply were no experts or museum curators or scholars who could boldly counter Tetryannikov's expertise and explain why he was completely wrong in his assessment of the collection. So why is this a problem? Well, in the early 1980s, the entire ecosystem of the icon world in the US and in Western Europe as well collapsed. If the Hann collection couldn't be trusted, how about all the other icons that we were looking at? This false narrative created a long-lasting effect on how people view and still view icons. It fostered distrust and significantly damaged how icons were perceived by Western audiences. How many times have I heard people say, oh, icons, always problematic, or icons with so many fakes, which simply is not true. Of course, there are fakes, but not less or more than in any other major art form. That is exactly why it is so important that we, museum curators, scholars, experts, and especially students, are exposed to as many icons as possible. We need to gaze at them, look and look again critically, to learn to trust our own eyes, rather than simply just repeating what others say. And that is why displaying icons in museums is crucial, and why it's so wonderful that the Louvre will open their new galleries dedicated to Byzantine and Eastern Christian art in 2027. Museums are the only places we have, the only places we can go to in the Western, non-Orthodox world to see and study all icons. Also, it's hard to overstate how important this is for the general public to see icons in museums. Museums must nurture the public's interest through exhibitions, programs, and activities, because if we fail to maintain that interest, the interest in the art form itself will fade, and with it, private and governmental funding, to be very practical for a moment. As we all know, unseen is unloved. At the Icon Museum and Study Center in Clinton, we are doing our part. Next year, we'll present an exhibition with highlights from the Economy Museum Recklinghausen from Germany, which will be the first time, which recalls with us, which will be the first time that American audiences will have the opportunity to see their exquisite collection. Additionally, we are currently working on an exhibition for 2028 with icons from North American collections, where we are focusing on post-Byzantine icons, because we realized that this period remains underexplored in the US, and we strongly believe that this latter phase of the long history of icon painting is an essential part of the biography of the art form as a whole. Many of these icons have been hidden in storage rooms for decades and have never been thoroughly researched. In preparation for this show, our curator Justin Wilson and I have visited already several museums and university collections over the past few months, and we realized that the museums in the US probably still have not fully recovered from the Hann scandal of the 1980s. Well, yesterday there was actually a very interesting discussion we had about with Catherine, the icons from the Chasing Museum, where they are still unsure about the dating. Is it late 19th, late 20th, or rather 16th century? So I think it was a very interesting example of what I'm talking about here, where some important original icons are misidentified as later icons, and vice versa, 19th century icons are being labeled as 15th or 16th century works of art. There's a lot of work to be done, and it feels incredibly rewarding to be part of such an exciting project. I will show you just a few icons that we are currently working on. These are two magnificent Cretan icons from Dartmouth College, three hierarchs with a large, more than a meter high, excellent condition, late 15th, early 16th century from Crete, a beautiful 15th century Annunciation. Two icons from the Harvard Art Museums, two Russian icons to the left, Konevskaya, to the right, a 14th century, very important Russian icon, the Archangel Gabriel. I knew this icon from a publication from the 1950s. It has never been on display since then. An icon signed by Emmanuel Lampardos. That name, we have seen many icons already signed by this master. Here's another one at Risdy in Providence, Rhode Island, dated 1603. Has never been on display. Another beautiful, very interesting 16th century triptych from the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston. We will have this update, so that's never been on display again. We will have this icon long-term loan within a few months to show it in our museum in Clinton. The Menil collection in Texas, fabulous small collection, but fabulous quality. To the left, again, Emmanuel Lampardos, St. Notorious, the Russian icons, St. Athanasios, St. Nicholas. The Walters Art Museum, we had a wonderful day with Christine Sierka, who will speak after me, at the Walters Art Museum, where we saw their Russian and Greek icons. They have a wonderful collection, again, highest quality. Just a few examples of the Russian icons. And last but certainly not least, icons that will be included in the 2028 exhibition, two panels attributed to George's Quamsels of the highest quality that we, thanks to the generous support of one of our board members, recently acquired for the museum. And to the right, a signed icon by Francesca Fertzas. There was, thank you, yeah, you're better at that than I am.
In Greek, yes.
In Greek, yes. That was donated by a collector from Boston 3 years ago. So, gazing at icons, let me conclude. The world of icons and Orthodox art is incredibly rich. Icons take you on a journey. They are powerful messengers and beautiful works of art. And they deserve an audience. They are part of worldwide heritage and have an important story to tell about humanity, about us. But in order to tell the right story, we first must decipher these objects, because we need to know exactly what we are talking about. And therefore, we have to gaze at icons, look at them again and again. The great 19th century British art historian John Ruskin once said, and I quote, "Hundreds of people can talk for one who can think, but thousands can think for one who can see. Thank you.